when you ignore law breaking in one sphere, you're going to see it in other spheres, as we've seen with these violent riots that have been dominating certain parts of LA.
Chaos has reigned in the streets of Los Angeles in recent days. You've certainly seen the images and the footage by now of protesters and rioters clashing with federal law enforcement, but also Los Angeles law enforcement, especially in the Paramount neighborhood. Cop cars have been set on fire. One reporter was shot with a rubber bullet by law enforcement. These clashes have been described as, quote, relatively minor by Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, and also as obviously major by Republicans who see them as significant examples of how Democrats are approaching this question of deporting or not deporting people who are in the country illegally, as the Trump administration wants to be laser focused on doing. The Wall Street Journal reported that a lot of this kicked off when, quote, ICE agents appeared to follow Stephen Miller's tip at a recent meeting. He said people should target places like Home Depot, and conducted, quote, an immigration sweep Friday at the Home Depot in the predominantly Latino neighborhood of Westlake in Los Angeles, helping set off a weekend of protests around LA County, including at the Federal Detention Center in the city's downtown. On Saturday, Trump ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to Southern California, despite objections by Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom. Law enforcement officers used tear gas, rubber bullets, and flashbang stun grenades against increasingly unruly crowds. Demonstrators threw tree branches, scooters, fireworks, and debris from a freeway overpass onto police vehicles below. The unrest continued Monday, and roughly 700 Marines were dispatched to protect federal property and personnel. So that's the state of play. I wanted to talk to Heather Mac Donald. I really wanted to talk to Heather Mac Donald. I'm very excited that we had an opportunity to ask her some questions. Heather Mac Donald is a Thomas W. Smith Fellow at the Manhattan Institute and contributing editor at City Journal, where surely you have read her work. Her books include The War on Cops and The Diversity Delusion. She has covered these issues for a very long time. In fact, Donald Trump's first attorney general called Heather Mac Donald, quote, the greatest thinker on criminal justice in America today. If you're on the left, you may disagree with Heather Mac Donald, but I hope that she challenges a lot of the arguments that we're hearing in the corporate press, the legacy media these days about how there's so much background about California, how California has handled immigration policy over the last decade, let alone the last year, let alone the last week. So very excited to have Heather Mac Donald on the program to give her reaction. Make sure to subscribe over at undercurrents.tv for the premium experience to hear this full interview with Heather Mac Donald. No edits, all of the questions. You get that only if you're a member of our Undercurrents.tv community. Subscribe on YouTube, wherever you download your podcasts. Heather Mac Donald, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Emily.
It's great to have you here. And an important point that you've made for City Journal is that California's enforcement of immigration law, it's actually probably one of the most disastrous places in the entire country and one of the most interesting case studies of democratic policies in the entire country. So probably no coincidence that this is all breaking out in California. How do you see California's unique role in this as a state and as a government, Heather?
Well, it is the sanctuary state, and Los Angeles is the sanctuary city par excellence. That means that it is actively opposing federal authority. So it makes it rather ironic that now the politicians there are so upset that Donald Trump is allegedly using federal authority to maintain order, to try to restore order in the face of this anarchic riots. But California routinely defies the requests of our immigration agents, which are known as ICE agents, to let the ICE agents know when an illegal alien criminal is being released from prison or jail, so that the ICE agents can take custody of this, let me reassert, criminal who has maybe committed homicide, rape, burglary, theft, so that ICE can take custody of this illegal alien criminal and deport him. And you would think that local law enforcement authorities would be grateful for ICE for getting another gangbanger off their hands that they don't have to worry about in their local community. Instead, California officials routinely let that illegal alien criminal go so that ICE cannot pick him up. That leads the country. Over half of all of these refusals to cooperate with ICE occur in California over a brief 2-year period. California released over 13,000 convicted illegal alien criminals back into the general population. LA's jails do the same. So what we have is a widespread winking at the most fundamental aspects of law. And according to broken windows theory, what you would expect is that when you ignore law breaking in one sphere, you're going to see it in other spheres, as we've seen with these violent riots that have been dominating certain parts of LA over the weekend.
Well, Heather, you said violent riots, anarchic riots, and I was told by Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass that these were, quote, relatively minor. So, how do we characterize what we've seen in the streets of Los Angeles, where you have Mexican flags being hoisted over burning cop cars? Are these mostly peaceful protests, or are they violent riots?
Well, this is a very philosophical distinction, I think, Emily. It is true that not all of Los Angeles is burning. That would be almost impossible given the size, it's 400 square miles or something. But there are places where there's complete hatred of order, where there's a zealous rage against property, against public officials, against law enforcement officials. That is unacceptable. One outbreak of that type of anarchy threatens the civil order. So the question is, do you pay attention to the parts and say, well, there's parts where cars are not being burned, where law enforcement is not having concrete thrown at it overhead from freeway overpasses onto the cars and persons of California Highway Patrol. There are places in Los Angeles where you do not have Molotov cocktails and fireworks being thrown at officers. Therefore, this is okay. No, it is not okay. We cannot continue to dismiss these breakdowns of basic civil rules and expect to hold on to a civilized society.
And Heather, I'm at least a little surprised that Karen Bass, I shouldn't single her out, but basically Democrats in general have seemed to make this issue more about Trump than about looking like they care that California continues to subvert federal immigration enforcements and all of that. Are you surprised? What do you make of the Democratic Party's response overall?
Well, there's been in the Democratic Party and in California in particular, what I call the Great Inversion, where elected officials no longer take it as their primary responsibility trying to make the lives of law-abiding, hardworking citizens more possible, more functional by maintaining roads, by maintaining law and order, by protecting property, by maintaining challenging peaceful schools. And instead, they've decided that their primary obligations are to the dysfunctional, the antisocial, and the criminal, whether it's vagrants that are colonizing city streets or people who have come into this country and their first act in arriving is an illegal one, to invade and to not follow our laws, even though there's millions of immigrants who patiently wait in line to follow the legal procedures. But our California politicians, and more generally the Democrats, make the lawless their primary concern. We've had an entire movement in California to de-incarcerate, to de-prosecute, to decriminalize on the basis that if we enforce the law in a colorblind neutral fashion, we will have a disparate impact on Black criminals. And so you've had important, influential prosecutors in places like Los Angeles, Oakland, California, which is in east of San Francisco, across the East Bay, in San Francisco, say, we're simply not going to enforce the law in certain respects, whether it's for shoplifting, trespass, resisting arrest, because that would have a disparate impact on Black criminals, and to hell with the law abiding. So the public officials no longer feel that their primary obligation is to people who are playing by the rules, and instead you have an entire advocacy class. I can't even imagine the number of activist groups in California dedicated either to expanding the already full panoply of rights enjoyed by illegal aliens or expanding the panoply of rights enjoyed by criminals, expanding the panoply of rights enjoyed by homeless vagrants who make streets terrifying for hardworking bodega workers and employees of immigrant businesses, because they've colonized them and have turned them into crack dens and prostitution havens. That's who our politicians care about. They treat hardworking Californians and Americans as simply ATMs, cash machines to fund their utopian anti-order projects.
And I want to ask about both the style and the substance, the politics and the substance of Donald Trump mobilizing the National Guard. There's some esoteric legal arguments happening now about what, constitutional ability he has to do that, and also the Marines. So Heather, just on the substance question, what do you make of that? Do you think that is ultimately helpful to easing the tensions and the chaos in Los Angeles? Is it inflaming them? Is it good or bad, basically, from your perspective?
Well, it's going to inflame them if our politicians in California continue to say it should inflame them. The National Guard are there to protect federal ICE officers, the immigration enforcement officers, who have been assaulted when they tried to carry out federal law of deportation through judicial warrants. The ICE agents, this all began on Friday when they went to 3 workplaces or around workplaces to execute federal warrants. This was perfectly legal. And the National Guard has been called out to make sure that they're no longer attacked, that federal buildings are no longer attacked, that federal vehicles are no longer attacked. That is a perfectly legitimate function, and it is a minor and modest one. They are not there with tanks. They are not engaging with the rioters. They are simply standing quietly in front of federal buildings and making sure that if ICE agents are engaged in another effort to pick up illegal aliens who are eligible for deportation, they will not be attacked again. So I think that's perfectly appropriate. It is the politicians who are whipping people up into a frenzy that somehow these 300 members of the National Guard who are standing way off into the background should be further cause for rioting.
All right, to see the rest of the interview, become a member of the Undercurrents.tv community. Undercurrents.tv, subscribe there for the premium experience, subscribe on YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much.